introduction. A very good evening to all the academicians and research scholars for today's session on insight on research design and process. I'd like to share the screen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So just confirm me whether the screen is visible.
No, it's,
Yes, ma'am.
no, it's not visible, ma'am.
It's
Oh,
not visible.
yeah, yeah. Yes, now it's visible.
Okay. Once again,
Ma'am, I think you have muted.
Not is audible.
am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Once again, I welcome all the academicians and research scholars for this wonderful session on insight on research design and process. So basically, today's session is outlined into two categories, that is introduction to research and followed by research process and research design. I would like to begin the session with a word called as curiosity. Curiosity is the general tendency of the human beings, like why the sky is blue, why there is day and night, why the dollar rates are high, why there is poverty in India and Africa, why there is a gap between expected and actual competency of the employees. So why there was the merging of SBI and associate banks, why the dollar rates are high. Like this, we have so many questions in our day-to-day life activities. So all these questions has to be addressed through a proper research process. Here I would like to remember Sir Isaac Newton. Uh, can the audience tell me what was the contribution of Sir Isaac Newton? From the audience, anyone?
Gravitation.
Yeah, exactly. So, one summer evening, Sir Isaac Newton was sitting in a garden where an apple fall on his head from top to down, and he got a curiosity why the apple is falling from top to down, why not from down to top. So this curiosity led to a theory called as theory of gravitation. In the same way, curiosity leads to research. So when we talk about research, the word research can be split into two: re and search. Re means again and again, whereas search means finding of the facts. So when we join this, so again and again, we will be finding the facts. So this is the general meaning of what is research. Even a layman can understand what is research. But what exactly research means? So you would have heard all the statements like it is answer to the question, it is finding solution to the problem, it is a scientific investigation, it is a purposive investigation, it is adding knowledge to the existing knowledge. So all this are the different meanings and definitions of research given by the experts. So keeping this as a background, everyone, your colleagues, your friends, everyone, we have to start doing research. We have to do something in research. But how to do it, how to go about it, it's a big question mark. So here to add some humor in the presentation, I would like to compare the word research with a cooking. And also not only me, there was a famous professor by named Chris. So he's from Stanford University. One of in his article, he has stated research is like cooking. So if we want to start preparing a delicious food, we need ingredients, we need resources, we need initial planning. In the same way, when we want to start a research, it will not just happen like that. It includes certain steps, certain process, strategy, plans, everything the research process involves. Say, for example, if you start to prepare a gulab jamun, it should end with gulab jamun only. It should not end up something sugar syrup. If you think of gajar ki halwa, it should be a kind of gajar ki halwa, not even kind, exactly as gajar ki halwa only. It should not be some payasam or something like that. So research is very systematic. It is with a purpose. Everyone does a research. It is not just for a namesake. Research is with a purpose, which is object oriented. So this is one of the beautiful example by Professor Chris of Stanford University, where he compares the term called as research to cooking. So, keeping this as the background, we'll start up with the first part of our presentation, that is steps in research process. So, here it can be called as research process or steps in research. Here, whatever the steps you are seeing, it is 10 steps. Most of the steps here is very much similar. You can find it in a thesis, you can find it in a project report, or you can find it in a research paper. Most of the steps are very similar. So everyone thinks research is a rocket science. Nothing like that. When you understand it, it is one of the easiest process, but a deep interest and understanding is required. Here, whatever you are seeing on the screen, these are the 10 steps in the research process. The first step is formulating the research problem, extensive literature survey, developing the hypothesis, preparing the research design, determining the sample design, collecting the data, analyzing of the data, hypothesis testing, generalization and interpretation, preparation of the report, or presentation of the results. So, one by one, we are going to discuss now what are the steps in the research process. Okay, the first step is formulating the research problem. Research starts with a problem. You can't address a problem like, for example, impact of COVID-19 pre and post. COVID-19 is already outdated. It is over. We are in 23. So we have to choose a problem where it is having relevance in the present scenario. It should not be outdated. You say like, I want to complete my research in a very easy way. You can't take up a topic which is like out of fashion, like barter transaction or barter system, which is, we are into a digital era. We are into digitalization. So there is no concept of barter transactions or anything like that. So the first step in the research process is formulating the research problem. So here the researcher has to address those kinds of problems which is novel in nature, which has some uniqueness. You can't solve the problem which is already being solved by some other researcher. What is your originality, or what is your novelty involved? What is your contribution to the field of research? Now the next question is, okay, we will identify the problem. What is the sources? Where do we get these problems? The sources are like, whenever you're reading a newspaper, daily updates are the news updates, or any economical changes that is happening, or NPA, you can talk about a reserve bank, cash reserve ratio, liquidity, some banking terminologies, some kind of problems that is happening, GST, demonetizations, something like that. So while reading the newspaper, you will get an idea. You will know what kind of problems the public is facing. One is that. And the second source would be review of literature. So it is like any some other researcher would have done in the area of your interest. So you will go through those review of literatures and identify what is the uncovered area, what was the major problem in that research paper. So you will try to address here. So here the sources of research problem would be reading a newspaper, or reviewing the article, and it can also be daily experience. For daily experience, say for example, now everywhere it is free buses are going surrounding to us, where ladies are traveling from one location to another without paying any charges for that. The problem is it is overcrowded because of the free scheme offered by the government of Karnataka. People are using very fastly, I can say, wherever they want to go, they just use this facility. So here the researcher can address this problem. So this was just an example. So this problem can be identified while reading the newspaper, while reviewing the literature. Our daily life experiences is also one of the sources to identify the problem. So the first step in the research process is to identify the problem. So here the problem that which you are addressing, it should be of having a present relevance and it should be object oriented. Okay, my guide has told to identify the problem, I will identify the problem. There should be some purpose, there should be some objective involved in that. If you ask an HR manager, what is the problem for the HR manager? High employee turnover. People will be coming, going very frequently. So that is a major problem which can be addressed. When you ask for the marketing manager, what is the problem? The marketing manager, the problem is competitors are coming up with the new features of the product. So each individual, each sector has their own problems. So it is up to the researcher interest which domain he is interested. Depending upon that, he can address the research problem. Say, for example, here the researcher at this stage, he has identified the problem. Once the problem is identified, the very important step is extensive literature survey. So this extensive literature survey, which is also called as review of literature. Everyone are, when it comes to knowledge, everyone are not perfect in all the concepts. Everyone can't be master of all the subjects. So, extensive literature survey or review of literature, once a researcher has identified the problem, to get the background knowledge about that problem, this step plays a very, very important role. As a researcher, I can strongly say this is the foundation of any research. If you're strong in your review of literature, you can, rest of all other steps, it is very easy to plan. So extensive literature survey, the researcher at this stage, he will review various articles. It can be from the library, some journals, references books that is available, or now we are into digital era. We have so many e-resources, like we have Google Scholar, very popular platform where you can download the research paper. When your colleges have subscription for EBSCO, JGate, so these are the various e-resources, Show the Ganga for the thesis, InflipNet. So all these e-resources is available. If you are interested in one particular problem or one particular domain, to get the background knowledge of that, you have to do review of literature. So the sources of review of literature. The question mark is how to do the review of literature. See, gone are those days, like traditional way of research, books was the only source. Now we are into e-resources, e-books is available, articles are available through online, thesis. When I say e-resources, it is not only at the national level, even at the international level. If you have observed, like research articles come up with ISSN, ISBN, DOI, ABDC journal, Q1, Q2, Q3 journal, Scopus index. Say for example, when it is national, like ISSN, which stands for International Standard Serial Number, ISBN, International Standard Book Number, DOI, Digital Object Indicator. So with these ISSN number, when you go for Google Scholar platform, just give a title of that research paper, or if you just type those keywords like ISSN number, it might be, or anything like that, that article will be available very handy. So you can download that and you can just go through those research paper. Then why we have to study? The next question is, okay, you have collected different articles from library, books, e-resources, journals, magazines. Okay, what's the next? So here the researcher will get the background knowledge of the problem which has to be addressed. At the same time, the researcher will identify research gap. So this is very important. The main purpose of review of literature is to identify the research gap. So research gap means what the other researchers, what they have covered, what has to be covered, what is the scope for the further study, what is the future study can be taken up. So review of literature gives a clear and fair idea for the researcher to go ahead what has to be addressed. The unaddressed problem can be addressed by the researcher from his study. So once, so now the first step was formulating the research problem. The second step is extensive literature survey. After that, literature survey, research gap identification. Once that is done, research questions. So research questions, what are the questions to be answered? So depending upon the research questions, research objectives will be framed. So always the objective should start with the keywords like to study, to analyze, to understand, to evaluate, to identify, to analyze. So these are the keywords which has to be used for the objective of the study. So once the objective is done, the next step is developing the hypothesis. This is one of the very important step, like review of literature. Hypothesis. So the word hypothesis. So here it is a tentative statement. One word to define the word called hypothesis is it is a tentative statement. So here, for example, in hypothesis, we have two kinds of hypothesis basically. That is null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis, it is a statement of no difference. Alternative hypothesis, it is a statement of difference. Where example, I'll frame an hypothesis like null hypothesis. There is no significant relationship between family income and family expenditure. I'll repeat once again. There is no significant relationship between family income and family expenditure. That is null hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis, there is a significant relationship between family income and family expenditure. So you can observe here, there are two, in any kind of hypothesis, there should be two variables. That is independent variable and dependent variable. So in this statement, whichever I have made right now, the family income is an independent variable, whereas expenditure is dependent. When in a family system, expenditure is depending upon the family income of the persons or of the members in the family. So with that logic, an hypothesis, two kinds of hypothesis is framed. There is no significant relationship between family income and expenditure. Alternative hypothesis, there is a significant relationship between family income and expenditure. See, generally we know that there is a relationship, but research is not like that. It is evidence based. We have to prove it. Simply in a way, we can't just say like that. Yes, there is a relationship. Yes, there is no relationship. What is the evidence? What is the analysis that you have done? So here, where I have highlighted a word called as validity. So these statements has to be validated with the statistical test involved in that. So in the further steps, I'll be talking about testing of the hypothesis. So at this stage, you have to know developing the hypothesis. Where it is a tentative statement, we have two categories of hypothesis. One is null hypothesis and another one is alternative. In null, there is no significant difference. In alternative, there is a significant difference. So this statement has to be accepted or rejected. We have to decide in the further step of research. So formulating the research problem, extensive literature survey, developing the hypothesis. And the next step, and which is also one of the very important concept in our today's session, that is research design. So basically, research design is a blueprint, or it's a framework, or it's an outline which helps the researcher to carry out his research work further steps. Say, for example, if we are traveling somewhere, we don't know the location, if we use this Google Map. So Google Map will help us what is the further direction to reach that particular destination or location. The same way, research design helps the researcher to follow certain steps in the research process. So here
Hello,
are
ma'am.
a list of questions. Yes, sir.
Sorry for interruption. Can you make your screen into a slideshow, ma'am? Slideshow mode.
Okay, okay, sir. Is it okay, sir?
Yeah, okay now.
Yeah.
Sorry for interruption. You can carry on.
Yeah, that's okay. So I was talking about the fourth step, that is research design. So here, research design is a blueprint. It's a framework which helps the researcher. See, whenever we are struck into anything, we will ask the expert. What we are struck here, we don't know what is the next process. But here in research, if we just refer the research design, it will give us a clear path, a clear direction, how to reach our objective of the study. So here is a list of questions like, what is the study about? So when I say what is the study about, we have different tiny varieties of study, whether it is a descriptive study, whether it is an analytical, or it is an empirical study, or it is a qualitative research. Next is why the study is being made. What is the purpose? Simply, even we have to do the research, but what is the purpose involved in that? There should be certain purpose. And the C question here, where will the study be conducted? Here comes a very beautiful concept, that is sampling design. So when we talk about GST, we can't say at the world level we are doing the study. It's highly impossible. You have to restrict where the study is conducted, in which location. And when it comes to type of data, we have varieties of data. What kind of data you're collecting? Next is how many years of data you're collecting, whether 2 years data, 5 years data, 10 years data. And when we talk about sampling design, we have sampling techniques over here, probability, non-probability. And next is data, what kind of data to be analyzed, what kind of report. So to tell you in a precise way, a research design is a blueprint or a framework which gives a clear path to the researcher to go ahead to achieve the research objectives. So that's more than enough to understand what is this research design. Next, the fifth step is determining the sample size. This is one of the, again, a very important step. The picture you can see here, this is the population and this is the sample. In our day-to-day life, example, like whenever we are cooking, whenever we are preparing the rice, we will check whether the rice is ready to serve or not. So we will not check each and every rice. We will just say, we'll take a sample and we will say, okay, the rice is ready to serve and eat. The same logic applies in the research. For example, if the study is something on the impact of GST on unorganized sector, or example, another topic like the impact of digitalization on unorganized sector. When I say unorganized sector, it is like small vegetable vendors, flower, roadside business peoples, like that. So here, if your topic is like that and your population, so say for example, population is India. So this study, the concept of digitalization was applicable throughout India. So we are in Bangalore and you have to do the study on the impact of digitalization on the unorganized sector. The population is India. It is highly difficult to collect the data from all the citizens of India. So you will establish a sampling frame. So from the population, India, in India, we have categories, North India, South India, different kinds of categories. So in that, you will select South India. That South India is called as sampling frame. So again, the researcher will feel in South India, again, we have different states. It's difficult to collect the data. Next, again in South India, the researcher will focus on Karnataka. So that is your sample. So you can see here, from the population, a sample is drawn. So this is the entire population. From the population, the sample is drawn. So now our population was India, sampling frame was South India, Karnataka was our sample. In Karnataka, again, the researcher will think so many districts are there. So we will precise a sample size in Karnataka, Bangalore 296 example. So simply in research, we can't say numbers like this 296. We have to justify that statistically, how we arrived at some sample size numbers like this 296 or 396, whatever. We have to justify because research is evidence based. Simply, generally, we can't speak anything. It should be evidence based. So 296 is your sample size. So this was the stage I wanted to explain what is population, what is a sampling frame, what is a sample, and what is a sample size. So when we talk about sample, we have something called a sampling technique. So in the sampling technique, we have probability and non-probability sampling. It is again a very different, very bigger concept, probability and non-probability concept. Like in probability, where each and every element in the population is given importance. That is called as probability. Whereas non-probability, each and every element has not given the importance. Like researchers will select the sample units whichever they are interested in studying. So under probability we do have different sampling technique, and under non-probability we do have different sampling technique. So this sampling technique helps the researcher in deciding whether I'm going for convenient sampling. The example which I quoted now, the impact of digitalization in unorganized sector, the entire process from India to South India, from South India to Karnataka, from Karnataka to Bangalore, the entire process was like convenient. Based upon the researcher convenient, he has reduced his sample size in each stages. So it depends upon the researcher what kind of sampling technique that they are adopting for the study. Depending upon that, their sample size will be decided. So sample size helps the researcher in collecting the data. If you're doing research on a like preparing the questionnaire, you are collecting a primary data. So here you have to decide what is the sample size. When you decide certain number, the researcher has to justify why it is 296, why not it is some other number. So the researcher has to justify the number which they have quoted in the research work. So next, determining the sample size was the fifth step. Once the sample design or the sample size is done, next step is collecting the data. So collecting the data. So when we talk about data, we have two categories. One is primary data and secondary data. The example which previously I gave for sampling design, the impact of digitalization on unorganized sector, it is completely a primary data involvement where the researcher will collect the data from the unorganized vendors by questionnaire. Though they are like uneducated, the researcher can go like asking questions and getting their responses orally, and then we can collect the data. So if that process is involved, that is called as primary data. Secondary data, when we talk about secondary data are those data which is already available. Example, for our students, when we give like making the analysis of a company, 5 years balance sheet analysis of a company, or a comparative analysis of one company balance sheet to another company, or taking up the RBI report, taking up the budget analysis of our country. So it is like already available data. When you are taking already available data for the analysis, that is called as secondary data. When you're taking first-handed data, where the researcher personally go and collect the data, that is called as primary data. So there is no hard and fast rules in the research, like you have to do only primary, you have to do secondary. It can be a combination of primary and secondary data. Combination of primary and secondary data can be conducted for the research work. So once the data is collected, next is analyzing the data. Analyzing the data. When we talk about analysis, we have descriptive analysis, we have inferential analysis. So analyzing of data, god, those days, like in the olden days, doing analysis was like quite difficult. Manual calculations was involved, but now because of the softwares, like it can be SPSS, statistical package for social science, it can be AMOS, analysis of movement structure. For the analysis tools, these are the various analysis tools that is available. So using this, well, the researcher has to collect the data. Once the data is collected, the data has to be coded in these softwares. So once the coding has happened, what depends upon the objective of the study, the researcher has to decide what kind of analysis to be done. So when we talk about a test, whether it is a parametric test or a non-parametric test to be adopted, whether you are analyzing the relationship, you have to go for correlation. When you're doing a impact of independent variable on a dependent variable, go for the regression. So like that, depending upon the objective of the study, the researcher has to analyze the data. So once the analysis of the data is done, the next step is hypothesis testing. So hypothesis testing. So in the third step, so it was developing the hypothesis. So here I had made two statements, that is null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. There is no significant relationship between family income and family expenditure, and there is a significant relationship between family income and expenditure. So these were the two tentative statement which I had made at this stage. So we have developed the hypothesis now. Once the hypothesis is developed, this hypothesis has to be tested. So here comes the significance value. If it is greater than 0.05, we will accept the null hypothesis. If it is not greater, we will reject null hypothesis. So here in the picture, the null hypothesis is denoted as H0 and alternative hypothesis is denoted as H1. So here, depending upon the objective of the study, the researcher will decide what kind of hypothesis to be framed. And very importantly, every hypothesis should have an IV and DV. It should have an independent variable and a dependent variable. So here hypothesis testing has to be done. So once the hypothesis testing is done, the next step is interpretation, generalization and interpretation. So here, see, with the help of the e-resources that we have, like it can be Google Forms, we will collect the data, we have a software, we will feed the data, we will make the analysis. Anyone can do that, but here comes very important interpretation. So here the researcher should bring the domain knowledge, and he has to include his domain knowledge along with the interpretation or along with the statistical results, whatever that the researcher has got, statistical results plus domain knowledge together will go a very good match for the interpretation. So here the researcher has to decide like what kind of interpretation depending upon the statistical results. When I say interpretation, it is like what was the findings of the study. So basically in research we go FCS, that is finding, conclusion, and suggestion. So just a key word to remember, that is FCS, finding, conclusion, and suggestion. So from the statistical analysis, what the researcher has done, what was the findings? What is the conclusion that can be drawn? What is the suggestion can be drawn? So here, suggestion, when we talk about the suggestion, so here the researcher has to bring the domain knowledge here. When you're talking about finance, when you're talking about banking, so how your results will have an impact in those sectors. So generalization and interpretation is very important step in the research process. Next, after the interpretation, the next and the last step in the research process is that preparation of the report or presentation of the research report or presentation of the research results. Basically, here we have gone through the 9 steps, including this. This is the last step in the research process. A researcher doing research for 3 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, 4 years, sometimes it goes above that. So the research report is a, what I can say is that it's a medium. It's a medium to share the research experience to others. So whatever, right from the problem that you have identified, right from what kind of review of literature you have done, what is the objective of the study, what is your hypothesis, whether you have tested your hypothesis, whether what kind of research design, what's the sampling technique you have adopted, what is the sample size, collecting the data, whether it is a primary data or a secondary data, what is the statistical tools used, whether you have tested the hypothesis, interpretation. So research report is communicating the research experiences, where the researcher will communicate the research experiences to others. When I say others, there are various stakeholders, like it can be the policy implementer, the government, or the academicians, or at the university level, the professors, or it can be any government funded projects or anything like that. So it is a medium or it where the researcher share his research experience right from starting till the end to the stakeholders about his research experience, right from problem till the findings. Everything in detail report will be prepared by the researcher and it will be published. So these were the 10 steps. Yes, these were the 10 steps, that is formulating the research problem, review of literature, developing the hypothesis, preparing the research design, determining the sample design, collecting the data, analyzing the data, hypothesis testing, generalization and interpretation, preparation of the report or presentation of the results. So if these 10 steps is implemented by the researcher will be very successful in his research. So what I can say is that the complete research depends upon the area of interest. In whichever domain you're interested, you have to go and address those kinds of problems. If you're interested in finance, you have to address the problems which is happening in the finance. And when it comes to review of literature, it's a very big e-commerce platform that is available. So you can make utilization of those library access. Everything will be available. The only thing is that you need to put time and effort for that. So these were the 10 steps in the research process, which involves also the research designs. So, any doubts? Um, Parvez sir? The session is open for the questions now. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Any questions?
Hello, ma'am. Good evening.
Yes. Yeah, very
Ma'am,
good
this is
evening.
Preeti from CMS B School, Jain University. Ma'am,
Yeah.
I have a query that should I set the research title first or hypothesis first? Hello.
Actually, yes. It was a very good question.
Okay.
First of all, it is not according to my knowledge of research. What I can say is that it is not research title or it is not research hypothesis. First, the researcher has to identify the problem and do a review of literature. So depending upon that comes title. But what is happening here, first the researcher will choose a topic and then go for identifying the problem, then review of literature. First it should be identification of the problem and followed by review of literature. Then the researcher can decide title of the study. Hypothesis and all will be, it is like further steps where after review of literature, the researcher has to identify the research gap. How your study will be different. You can't study the problem which is already been addressed. What is the novelty involved in your research work? So it is not research topic. It is not hypothesis. First, identify the problem, review of literature, then go for identification of the research gap, objectives, then comes hypothesis.
Ma'am, hypothesis is nothing but I'm just predicting the things right related to research. Like once I identify the problem, I have to see the positive and the negative sides of the problem identified. Is it so?
Yeah, it is like you can just make a guesswork, but actually that stage you will be reaching only you have your objectives of the study, because hypothesis is depending upon the objective of the study. Simply at the stage of review of literature or at the stage of setting up the title of the study, you can't have an hypothesis. It is like a linkage. What I can say is that problem, like after that, it will actually start from research gap. That research gap should be linked with the research question, and research question should be linked with research objectives, and research objective should have a link with the hypothesis. This sequence has to be followed. If you're directly skipping to hypothesis, it will not make any sense.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah.
Got a clarity. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, very good evening.
Ma'am, your explanation of the topic was very good. But I have all the time, I am also pursuing my PhD. And
Yes, ma'am.
very many times when I read a paper, I keep
Yeah.
on reading papers that is extensive literature review, literature survey.
Yeah.
The one problem that I have come across is in some of the papers, I am not able to identify what is a research gap. So I always wonder what is that? Am I not reading it properly or am I not understanding it properly? I have a doubt like this. Can you
Yes,
please
ma'am.
help me on this, ma'am?
Yeah, sure, sure. Even now, when I was doing my research, the same problem, how to identify the research gap. That was our biggest problem. Like, see, we have to download the research paper first. It depends upon the time period that you're taking. Say, for example, you have started your research in 2023. So, like
Yeah.
3 years, example.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 3 years, you are downloading all the research paper. It can be Indian Review of Literatures and it can be foreign literature.
Yeah.
So you have downloaded the research paper. So one
Yeah.
research paper, it is like you have to put your effort. It is not like cakewalk. So right from abstract, in abstract, you will have certain keywords. So
Yeah.
that is also a technique how to do review of literature in a very smart way. If you read 50 review of literature, 50, you say for example, you have downloaded 50 research papers. If you
Yeah.
want to go in thoroughly 50 research papers, it is time consuming. So what
Yeah,
you
I
can do is
know.
that, what you can do is that you can have a chart.
Yeah, I
Like,
prepare the chart actually. I have the
you can
literature
prepare
review
a
chart I
chart
have.
and you can write a title, author,
Yeah.
what was the
Yeah.
objective of the study, and what is
Yeah.
the tools that they have used, and what was the
Mm.
findings. I think
Yeah.
finding is a place where you can explore what they have not explored. Like
Yeah.
you can just see what they have not addressed. In
Okay.
every research, when you take up any standard thesis and all, at the end there will be something called as scope for the further studies. So that is
Yeah.
also one of the strategy where the researcher has not covered that. I'm covering that. That is one research gap. And another one is the researcher has done only descriptive analysis. I'm adopting some statistical tools. I'm adopting some conceptual models for my research work. So that is the
Okay.
research gap. The study was conducted in Hyderabad. The study is not conducted in Bangalore. It's a geographical gap.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
in the gap, we have varieties, geographical gap, statistical gap. So based upon this, we can identify the research gap.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. That is now I understood. I understood a little more about this research gap now. Thank you very much. And
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
will I keep reading. I have read so many papers by now on my topic. And now I know what to look for. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for
Yes,
clarifying
ma'am.
my doubt.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions?
Dear participants, questioning window is open for you. You'll be having 5 minutes for questioning. If you have any doubts, you can ask with the resource persons.
Hello, ma'am. This is Anupama here.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, just wanted to know, like, when we when we take a topic and formulate our objectives and the hypothesis, how do we know that the other person have not done this? This is my new thesis. What I am doing it.
That is what, ma'am.
It
Yeah, that is what your that like this is one of the foundation for your research work. This was a statement I made in my presentation. See, there are thousands of literature. Everything we can't cover, but at least maximum whatever possible, because the research period is not just 1 year. It is minimum 2.5, 3.5 year, depending upon whether you're full timer or a part timer. So in these years, at every 6 months, you'll be having your progress report. For every progress report, you have to show what is the progress that is happening in the literature review. Literature review is not only helpful in identifying the objectives of the problems, at the same time, it helps you to set the variables from the other research work, where that variables help you to frame the questionnaire and collect the data. That is the other part. As you told, how we will get to know that other researchers have not done, like they have formulated the same kind of objectives. So this shows you're not strong in the literature review. When someone, the external examiner or someone poses you the question, this objective, it is being addressed. So you have to justify, no, I have thoroughly gone through a review of literature. I have all the evidences that these objectives has not been addressed by anyone. Though it is addressed, my scope is different. My scope is not covering that. So you have to justify that. You can't take the objectives which is already taken and addressed by someone. Your objective should be different from that of the other researcher. And that you have to be very strong in your review of literature. Then only you can say strongly in front of anyone, yes, this is my new objective that I have formulated. It is not been taken from any of the research work. If that strongly you can say, you should have that background foundation of review of literature. Without that, any researcher may not be answerable to this particular question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Any other question? Okay then. So we'll conclude the session. Thank you, Monica ma'am. Truly, your session was very much informative, through which you have provided insight to knowledge on the research design and process. Thank you for taking stress for us. I appreciate your time and effort. My heartfelt gratitude to you for sharing your expertise. Ma'am, we are looking forward for your similar kind of sessions from your end in future too. So thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to say a statement. Research is not a rocket science. It is all our mindset. How we take it, it is so beautiful. The area is, whoever is thinking to start up research, the field of research is welcoming with the beautiful flowers and different varieties. Kindly uh, enter into the field of research and enjoy it. It is so beautiful. And I also thank the Bangalore University Teachers Council of Commerce and Management for providing me this wonderful platform to share my knowledge over this platform. A special thanks to Parvez sir for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, sir. And thank you, audience, for your patience listening, even in the evening time. Thank you.
It's our pleasure, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Next, on today is the last day. So on this concluding day of faculty development program, I need to acknowledge many people who are directly or indirectly involved to make this faculty development program success. First, I would like to thank the registry evaluator, Bangalore University, Sri Srinivas, and Dr. Sarvamangala, Dean and Chairman, Department of Commerce, Bangalore University, and President, General Secretary, and all the office bearers of BUTCCM to organize this faculty development program, especially to the faculty members of Bangalore University. Next, I would like to express my gratified acknowledgement to all the resource persons. Uh, Firstly, Dr. Deepak from MS Ramaya Institute of Management, Dr. Farooq Pasha from Government First Grade College, Kengeri, Dr. Amir from Presidency University, Dr. Christopher Dev Kumar and Dr. Monica S. from Christ Academy Institute for Advanced Studies for accepting our invitation and delivering the session on a different topics and giving a valuable insight on the research methodology. At the last but not the least, the participants. Really, you made this faculty development program successful with your participation and continuous support in all the 5 days. My gratified acknowledgement to all the participants on the behalf of myself and the behalf of Bangalore University and BUTCCM. We expect same kind of cooperation and support in coming days too. Hopefully, we will meet again with the same kind of program in future too. So thank you again. Have a great evening. And one more thing, at the end of the session, on the post session, you will be shared a Google form. Just fill the form uh, and give your feedback, and you can download your certificates.
Sir, it is
Thank
already
you.
shared in the chat box.
Yeah. So you
So it
can
is all.
download your just fill the feedback form and you can download your certificates. Thank you. Thank you all. If you want to give a feedback about the faculty, our program, you can go ahead.